faithfully sharing insights, exploring global great books.
Hi, this is Sally with the Book Talk.
Today, we're diving into historian Fan Shuzi's late Ming history, 1573 to 1644, covering from Emperor Wanli's ascension in 1573 to the Ming Dynasty's fall in 1644. These 71 years are termed the Late Ming by Fan Shuji, who argues it faced a major upheaval of economic globalization in the 16th and 17th centuries, forcing policy adjustments across the board. Fan Shuji is a history professor at Fudan University. This book, published in 2003, is the first comprehensive history on the late Ming era. The whole book spans 1.1 million characters, using a fresh global perspective to examine the Ming Dynasty's survival and collapse. It starts with an introduction subtitled Late Ming in a Globalized Perspective, focusing on how the late Ming encountered global trends and why it was called a major upheaval. So, this sets the book's background and core theme. The main text has 13 chapters, returning to traditional dynastic political history to explore political changes and the Ming's decline under this global view. Despite only 71 years, the late Ming is complex. I'll break this masterpiece into two parts. Part 1 covers the introduction's global perspective and the Wanli new policies. Part 2 focuses on factional conflicts, the Ming's fall under Emperor Zhang Juzheng, and how the late Ming declined amid globalization. All right, let's dive into part 1. Li Hongjiang called the late Qing an unprecedented upheaval in a century, but Fan Shuxi sees this upheaval starting as early as the late Ming. In his introduction titled Late Ming in a Globalized Perspective, he explores changes in maritime bans, policies, economy, and culture after the upheaval began. First, let's see how China got swept into globalization's wave. It all starts with Macau. From the late 15th to early 16th century, the age of exploration kicked off globalization, linking continents through flows of capital and goods. That's when Macau stepped onto history's stage. In 1497, the Portuguese rounded Africa's Cape of Good Hope, entered the Indian Ocean, and seized key trade ports on India's west coast. After controlling Goa, the maritime choke point between East and West, the Malacca Islands, and the so-called Spice Islands of the Moluccas, they began smuggling trade along China's southeastern coast. And in 1557, after building housing and villages in Macau, the Portuguese used leasing to establish it as their global trade hub. In the first year of the Wanli era, 1573, the Portuguese formally occupied Macau. With Macau as this transit hub, Portuguese merchant ships rode the summer southwest monsoon, loaded with silver plundered from the Americas. Departing from Lisbon, rounding the Cape of Good Hope, they first reached India to buy goods like pepper, ivory, and sandalwood, before setting sail again. Via the Malacca Strait, they arrived in Macau, spending the next year trading goods and silver for Chinese products like silk, sugar, porcelain, and more. The following summer, riding the southwest monsoon, they shipped these goods to Japan, sold them for silver, returned to Macau, and used Japanese silver to buy Chinese goods again. But, finally, they returned to Europe. Throughout this trade, Portuguese controlled international routes centered on Macau, making it China's maritime gateway to the world and integrating the Ming Dynasty into the global trade system. However, the Ming government enforced a maritime ban policy prohibiting private sea trade while only permitting limited official tribute trade with neighboring states. Portuguese trade lacked Ming official approval. Their partners were mainly Chinese smugglers, pirates, and Japanese merchants active along the southeastern coast. Later, Spanish and Dutch merchants also collaborated with coastal Chinese traders for smuggling operations. Later, after infighting within a Japanese tribute mission, the Ming government burned down the Ningbo Maritime Trade Office, which managed Sino-Japanese sea trade. As a result, To avoid conflict, stricter maritime bans were imposed. Revoking the Ningbo office blocked normal trade, forcing Japan to deal with China only via smuggling channels. Due to lucrative trade with Japanese merchants, Chinese smuggling networks rapidly expanded, controlling sea routes from Jiaoshan Islands to Zhangzhou and Quanzhou in Fujian, up to Japanese coasts. With massive profits and advanced firearms bought from Portugal, Chinese smugglers grew powerful, forming large pirate groups that gained military advantage against Ming forces. Monas! Wanting to further break free from the maritime ban policy just led to the rise of many pirate kings. For example, the famous pirate king Wang Ji. Wang Ji was a Huizhou merchant involved in sea smuggling. With sharp firearms and strong economic power, his forces grew fast, reaching over 100,000 men.
Wang Zi requested trade with the Ming Dynasty, but was rejected. So, he set up a military base in Hirado, Japan, raiding Chinese coastal ports and cities, even reaching Anhui and Jiangxi.
The Ming government viewed this sea smuggling force as wokou and hated them deeply. Eager to eliminate them, in the 38th year of the Jiajing era, Imperial Inspector Wang Benggu captured Wang Ji under imperial decree and executed him in Hangzhou. Meanwhile, Qi Jiguan and Yu Daiyu fought hard to suppress the wokou. But the wave of globalization intensified, and with commercial profits luring them, wokou kept emerging endlessly. And the Ming government gradually realized, but during the Jiajing era, the wokou threat couldn't be wiped out by force. Strict maritime bans only fueled smuggling and the wokou problem. To solve the wokou issue, it couldn't rely on violence. It needed an enlightened policy shift by the authorities. Finally, in the first year of the Longqing era, 1567, the Ming government abolished the maritime ban, allowing people to sail for private trade to the eastern and western oceans. Thus, the so-called wokou disturbance gradually faded away. After abolishing the maritime ban policy, marked by Portugal's formal occupation of Macau, private sea trade along the southeastern coast entered a new stage, with silver starting to flow into China in large quantities. From the 1580s, Macau entered a golden age, becoming the most important hub port for Portuguese trade with India, China, and Japan. At that time, Europe hadn't had the Industrial Revolution yet, so Chinese handicrafts were high quality and affordable, deeply loved by them. Back then, China mainly exported raw silk, silk fabrics, porcelain, etc., and imported small amounts of local specialties, resulting in a trade surplus. Thus, silver from the Americas and Japan flowed continuously into China. During the late Ming period, Japan produced 8,000 tons of silver, while the Americas produced 30,000 tons. Conservatively, about 10,000 tons, a quarter to a third, flowed into China, bringing massive wealth. Coupled with Zhang Juzheng's domestic Wanli new policies, this greatly boosted the Ming Dynasty's national power, making it the world's richest country and economic center at the time. The suddenly expanded overseas market and substantial inflow of silver boosted the Ming Dynasty's economy and social development, especially with the developed network of market towns in Jiangnan. Due to involvement from Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, and Japanese traders, China's production shifted from mainly domestic to serving both domestic and international markets. Because exported goods commanded high prices and substantial profits, they spurred a surge in production, pushing commodity economy development to unprecedented heights. These market towns served as multi-level hubs for this commodity economy. Take silk and cotton textile towns as examples. Places like Nanshan, Zhejiang, Wuqing, Xinxi, Ximen, and Tangji in Zhejiang all developed through overseas trade. Market towns were the foundation of Jingnan's economy and the basis of urban economy. Under globalization's influence, the late Ming entered the world trade system. Chinese handicrafts like silk were sold worldwide, reaping massive silver. Thus, Jiangnan's economic development accelerated, achieving early industrialization. The prosperous southern capital scroll, housed in China's National Museum, is called the Ming Dynasty's version of Along the River during Qingming Festival. A sign reading Goods from Eastern and Western Oceans available reflects late Ming urban consumer life connected to overseas markets. China also got swept into global currents in science and culture, starting the Western learning spreading east, process as Western cultural influence gradually grew. A key figure was the Jesuit missionary, most famously Italian Matteo Ricci, who entered China via Macau in 1582, Wanli's 10th year, to preach, never leaving thereafter. Ricci learned from predecessors' missionary experiences, blending Catholic doctrine with traditional Confucian teachings. He wore Confucian scholars' robes, modified church rules, and aligned the Bible with the 4 books and 5 classics, winning Chinese scholars' respect. Using this localized approach, Ricci drew enthusiastic responses from figures like Zai Taisu, Xu Guangqi, and Li Jizao, who converted to Christianity. Thus, Ricci unprecedentedly entered Beijing, settling there until his death in 1610, Wanli's 38th year. The Jesuits brought advanced Western science and culture, refreshing intellectuals and quickly creating a peak of Western learning spreading east. Books compiled by Jesuits or co-authored with Ming officials like Kung Yuan Gua Quan Tu, Jihei Yuan Ben, Tongwen Xuanji, Tai Si Shufar represented advanced Western scientific knowledge. They profoundly influenced late Ming intellectual circles. Late Ming thinkers like Li Ji and Donglin, party members Zhou Yuanbao and Feng Shi, befriended Matteo Ricci. Frequent intellectual exchanges occurred, as seen in Fine Yiji's small encyclopedia of physical principles from the Fu Society. Its coverage of Western optics, acoustics, and mechanics was closely tied to Jesuit knowledge dissemination. Additionally, starting in 1592, Ming forces defeated powerful Japanese troops in Korea, preventing its conquest, a rare Chinese military victory abroad. With Wanli's political reforms, economic prosperity, military victory in Korea, Portuguese trade, Jesuit arrivals, and Western learning, China had all factors to enter a new era. Yet, amid this transformation, China failed to generate revolutionary forces like the West to overturn traditional systems. And the late Ming fell, Manchus conquered China, restarting feudal monarchy along historical patterns. China missed its modernization chance. So what were the reasons? What exactly was the late Ming government doing during this upheaval? If the introduction unveils the transformation through a global lens, the 13 chapters analyze Ming's decline through traditional political history, showing rulers oblivious to crises while consumed by infighting. The book focuses on 6 late Ming emperors, referred to by era names: Jiujing, Longqing, Wanli, Taichung, Tianqi, Chongzhen, with Jiujing as Longqing's father. Wanli's eldest son, Emperor Taichung, Zhu Chengluo, died just 1 month after enthronement, leaving 2 sons. Though Tianqi and Chongzhen are 2 emperors, Wanli's 48-year reign was Ming's longest, combined with Chongzhen's 17 years. Thus, late Ming history centers primarily on Wanli and Chongzhen. Our story mainly revolves around events during the reigns of these 2 emperors, covering 3 aspects. First, the successes and failures of the Wanli new policies. Second, the factional chaos in the late Ming. Third, the internal and external crises during Chongzhen's reign. First, let's look at the Wanli new policies. We know the Wanli new policies were led by Zhang Juzheng, initially bringing a fresh outlook to the nation, but they failed to see a proper end. Fundamentally, this stemmed from power struggles within the Ming government. To grasp this, we must start with the power struggle between Emperor Wanli and the Chief Grand Secretary. Wanli was Emperor Longqing's son. He ascended the throne at just 10 years old. On his deathbed, Longqing entrusted the young emperor to Gao Gan, Gao Yi, Zhang Juzheng, and Fen Bao. The first three were Grand Secretariat ministers. The Grand Secretariat refers to the secretarial body established by Emperor Yongle after Emperor Hongwu abolished the chancellor system designed to assist the emperor with state affairs. Members of the Grand Secretariat are called Grand Secretaries. Among them, the Chief Grand Secretary held the most power, overseeing major policies. At that time, it was Gao Gong. However, the Grand Secretariat's power was constrained by the Directorate of Ceremonial, so Chief Secretary Gao Gong was often hampered by Feng Bao, the Director of Ceremonial at the time. The Director of Ceremonial was the most powerful position among the 12 eunuch directorates handling imperial affairs, responsible for finalizing state decisions. The final approval and sealing, this is why the Grand Secretariat was constrained by the Directorate of Ceremonial, specifically its director. This brings us to the Ming system of Piao Ni drafting and Pi Hong vermilion endorsing. As mentioned earlier, the Grand Secretariat served as the emperor's secretarial body. Its main task was to draft Piao Ni for the emperor. The Ming Dynasty implemented the Piao Ni and Pi Hong system for reviewing memorials. Piao Ni meant the Grand Secretariat drafted preliminary opinions on memorials submitted to the emperor, attaching small notes for reference. Only the Chief Grand Secretary had this drafting authority.
Pi Hong referred to the emperor reviewing the drafts, writing decisions in red ink, hence called Pi Hong.
Only after Pi Hong did a memorial gain legal effect. But as many late Ming emperors were young upon accession, unable to handle state affairs, or neglected governance, the Pi Hong process was gradually delegated to the Directorate of Ceremonial. Within the Directorate of Ceremonial, the highest-ranking director was responsible for safeguarding the imperial seal, completing the Pi Hong process, and final approval, thus holding the greatest power. And if the emperor neglected governance, the Director of Ceremonial would directly handle the vermilion endorsing in his place. If memorials were deemed unacceptable, they could be directly rejected and sent back to the Grand Secretariat for redrafting. Beyond being Director of Ceremonial, Feng Bao was also the superintendent of the Eastern Depot. We're all familiar with the Eastern Depot, a notorious, privileged secret police organization. It oversaw investigations, interrogations, and torture under eunuch control, answering directly to the emperor. As Eastern Depot superintendent, Feng Bao was its top commander. Moreover, Feng Bao enjoyed deep trust from Emperor Longqing, who entrusted him with guardianship duties. Empress Dowager Chen, Longqing's widow and Wanli's mother, also trusted Feng Bao exceptionally, tasking him with supervising Wanli's daily life. Now you understand Feng Bao, holding both Eastern Depot and ceremonial directorate powers, was immensely influential. Thus, Chief Grand Secretary Gao Gong, constrained by Feng Bao, feared his power and plotted to eliminate him, dreading eunuch dominance. Now, shortly after Wanli's enthronement, Gao Gong submitted a memorial, ostensibly about how regent ministers should guide the young emperor and handle governance, while omitting regent eunuch Feng Bao. It actually aimed to strip the ceremonial directorate's power. After receiving Gao Gong's memorial, Feng Bao immediately understood his intent and directly acted for the emperor. And he vermilion endorsed, acknowledged, follow ancestral rules, meaning no changes would be made. Gao Gong then submitted a second memorial pleading, refer to us ministers, meaning hand the memorial to Gao Gong's Grand Secretariat for drafting opinions. Feng Bao had no choice but to send it for drafting. After the draft note included opinions about impeaching Feng Bao, Bao Gong pretended to endorse it as Emperor Wanli, essentially approving excellent proposal, implement immediately, signed as Chief Grand Secretary. Believing the timing ripe, Gao Gong ordered his disciples to submit impeachment memorials against Feng Bao, attempting to topple him in one strike. But Gao Gong revealed everything to Zhang Juzheng, then a Grand Secretariat minister, hoping he'd join in overthrowing Feng Bao.
But unknown to Gao Gong, Zhang Juzheng resented being subordinate and leaked the plan to Feng Bao. Aligning with Feng against Gao, Feng Bao immediately devised countermeasures. He recalled Gao Gong telling colleagues after Long Qing's death, "How can a 10-year-old rule the realm?" Using this, Feng Bao attacked Gao before Empress Dowager Chen and consort Li, accusing him of belittling Emperor Wanli, saying, "How can a 10-year-old be emperor?" The empress and imperial consort were shocked, and Emperor Wanli's face changed color. All three believed Gao Gong harbored power-grabbing intentions. This single sentence sealed Gao Gong's fate. Gao Gong never expected his attempt to overthrow Feng Bao would backfire so spectacularly. Next morning at court, as Gao Gong and Zhang Juzheng arrived, eunuch Long Zheng presented an imperial edict announcing the empress's decree. Combining orders from imperial consort and emperor, it harshly condemned Gao Gong. As Long Qing's entrusted minister, he'd failed to properly assist Wanli, but instead seized power, terrifying the imperial family. The decree stripped Gao Gong of office, ordering his immediate departure from Beijing without delay. The biggest beneficiary of the Feng Gao conflict was Zhang Juzheng. Hearing of Gao Gong's dismissal, the other entrusted minister Gao Yi, already bedridden, was horrified. His condition worsened and he died vomiting blood 3 days later. With 2 ministers dead, Zhang Juzheng naturally became chief grand secretary, also winning Empress Dowager's trust to educate Wanli. Chief grand secretary. Soon after taking office, Wanli summoned Zhang Jung privately in the palace. Since Emperor Longqing never held private audiences, this caused a sensation, greatly boosting Zhang's authority. From 1573 to 1583, Zhang Juzheng wielded power to implement sweeping reforms, Wanli new policies, ushering in a new era for late Ming. First came political system reforms. Zhang introduced the performance evaluation system. Ministries recorded officials' duties with deadlines and ledgers, enabling monthly reviews. The system also required supervisory officials to report to Grand Secretaries. Thus, Zhang controlled ministries, elevating the Grand Secretariat to supreme authority. This unified decision-making during reforms, facilitating policy implementation. The system's success reduced bureaucracy, improved efficiency, and laid groundwork for economic reforms. Economically, targeting severe land monopolies and treasury deficits, Zhang initiated land surveys and tax audits. Thanks to the improved efficiency of the entire bureaucracy, by Wanli's 10th year, land surveying and tax audits had achieved remarkable results. The former uncovered 180 million mu of farmland that had evaded taxes, 1/3 of the nation's total, increasing fiscal revenue by 1/3. For tax reform, Zhang Juzheng mainly implemented the single whip method, consolidating grain taxes and labor duties into a single silver payment. This not only boosted treasury income and simplified payments for commoners, but also aligned with the silver-based global trade trend. Yet, the reform's success bred a huge crisis. The conflict between Emperor Wanli and the Zhanfeng power bloc. Young Wanli might have ignored Feng Bao and Zhang Juzheng's dominance, but as he grew older, tensions with his chief minister and eunuch intensified. Wanli first resented Feng Bao, though loyal Feng exercised harsh control over the young emperor. In 1580, Wanli's 8th year, after an all-night palace drinking session, Feng reported Wanli to Empress Dowager Li, leading to her scolding the emperor and threatening his removal. At 18, Wanli was forced by Feng to write a self-criticism edict apologizing to the Grand Secretariat, a massive blow to his dignity. As Wanli's tutor, Zhang Juzheng lectured earnestly, but still treated the emperor like a child. Once when Wanli misread ba as bei in the Analect's phrase si bo ru ye, looking grave, Zhang immediately roared in correction, so fiercely it terrified nearby eunuchs. In 1580, Wanli's 8th year, the 55-year-old Zhang, ailing and fearing his influence overshadowed the throne,
requested retirement, but Empress Dowager Li firmly refused, insisting Zhang assist Wanli until age 30. This decision deeply embarrassed Emperor Wanli. The Empress Dowager's words meant he couldn't rule personally as long as Zhang lived. Starting with this retirement incident, Wanli's fear of Zhang turned to hatred. Meanwhile, Zhang's urgent reform drive clouded his judgment of his position.
He often declared, "I'm not a minister, I'm a regent."
A minister serves, a regent rules. Clearly, their meanings differ fundamentally. Zhang's presumptuous attitude combined with the retirement crisis planted seeds for Wanli's brutal posthumous revenge. As we'll discuss later, in 1582, Zhang Juzheng died. Emperor Wanli immediately dismissed Fen Bao and banished him from Beijing. With the chief grand secretary and director of ceremonial, two greatest threats to imperial power, removed, Wanli began personally wielding power, finally acting according to his own will. To crush Zhang Juzheng's overshadowing authority, Wanli fabricated charges, nearly exhuming and desecrating his corpse. Feudal emperors treated ministers as disposable, elevating them to heavens or casting to hell. Even Zhang Juzheng, with his monumental achievements, couldn't escape this fate. Wanli's hatred for Zhang fueled a court-wide purge, ultimately abolishing the nascent reforms and devastating Late Ming's socio-economy.
This remains Wanli's most criticized legacy.
The Wanli new policies among China's most famous reforms achieved remarkable success in just 10 years. Under Zhang's governance, Min became the world's wealthiest nation. Treasury silver surged to 4 million taels, reversing Long Qing's 1.5 million deficit. Starting in 1592, Ming launched 3 major military campaigns across northwest, northeast, and southwest. These were the 3 great campaigns: suppressing Bojun's rebellion in Ningxia, resisting Japan in Korea 1592 to 1597, and quelling Yang Yinglong's revolt in Bozhou. The Korean resistance marked one of China's rare decisive victories against foreign powers. The reform's success stemmed not just from Zheng's brilliance and courage, but also Fen Bao's support. Their alliance, chief secretary and unit collaborating, created ideal conditions for Zheng's regency and reforms. Yet this cooperation also sowed seeds of the reform's downfall. Their power consolidation encroached on imperial authority, provoking Wanli's intense resentment. Meanwhile, Zheng's uncompromising reforms angered conservative officials, creating numerous enemies. With Zheng's death and Feng's exile, Wanli sent a clear political signal. Officials suppressed by Zhang flooded the court with impeachment petitions, igniting endless factional strife that doomed Ming. That's why historians keep saying the Ming Dynasty fell due to Wanli. Zhang Juzheng's death truly marked the starting point of the Late Ming's decline. All right, that wraps up our intro to Late Ming history and the rise and fall of the Wanli reforms. But that's all for part 1. Show notes are below. In part 2, I'll decode the factional wars and Chongzhen's path to the Ming's final collapse.
See you next time!